This is footage of my ward stacking Kinetic Blast build. Ward stacking has gotten popular this late because of the new timeless jewel Heroic Tragedy, which transforms notables into the Regenerative Runes passive. This one gives your Iron Flasks 2 charges whenever your ward breaks. It's possible to scale enough flask charges gained and use multiple of these nodes to ensure that your Iron Flask pops and restores your ward instantly whenever it breaks. Combine that with the Celestial Mathematics Keystone, which gives your attacks added cold damage equal to 25% of your ward, and you have both an extremely powerful offense and defense. On top of this, we can utilize Cast on Ward Break to trigger spells whenever we attack and whenever we're hit. It massively lowers the cooldown of link spells based on your total ward, so we link it to Immortal Call for massive uptime of around 80%, as well as a Power Charge on crit setup, a Tornado Gem to double hit, and a Stone Golem, which gives us some life regeneration as well as some extra ward. The Golem doesn't have to be tanky because we resummon it almost twice a second. I'll get into that later. As for the Golem, I probably wouldn't use companionship support with it, since from what the gem says, it doesn't take 15% of damage that would be taken to life, but 15% of damage period. That means the damage to your ward that would have been entirely mitigated by you would still go to the Golem. I haven't tested this though. Ward has a big weakness. We have incredible damage mitigation against hits, but ward doesn't actually do anything for damage over time. We have a cast on ward break setup, which is linked to a lot of things, and this means that we're going to be spending a lot of mana. The mana cost of Stone Golem, for example, is 155 mana alone, and Immortal Call is 74 mana. We're using a multi-link Squire setup, so our Kinetic Blast costs 133 mana per cast, or per attack. So we have a big mana problem. Since we're scaling flasks anyway, we can solve these problems and more by using this unique flask. It's Lavianga's Spirit, which recovers a ton of mana per second, and also sets all of our skill costs to 0. Alongside this, we can use this amulet, Katal's Geyser, which makes it so that our mana flasks have the enduring effect, which means that they don't stop recovering when you reach full mana. It's very comfy to play with, so you can, keep spamming it like this. And you can use the Runegraft of Quaffing right here. This gives us life recovery equal to mana recovery from flasks. It has this 25% reduced modifier, but it's additive with our other sources, and we have lots of increased recovery, so this isn't a big deal. With all of our flask scaling, this results in around 2,000 mana recovery and 2,000 life recovery per second. Plus, we take the Olroth bloodline, and this thing says you have 50 less damage taken from damage over time while you have Unbroken Ward, which is basically all of the time, so we don't really have to be afraid of damage over time anymore. Credit, by the way, to Poop Butts for the Quaffing idea, as well as the Laviangas, and just like a lot of inspiration in general. Okay, so moving on, we utilize that insane mana recovery from Laviangas by using Tinctures. So we use the Sap of the Season Tincture, which allows us to get up to 200% elemental resistances. Now you might say, well, you're using Kinetic Blast, that's not a melee weapon. So we need to borrow the node Seasoned Hunter from the Warden Ascendancy, so you have to be a ranger to do this. We're a Deadeye, and we use the Forbidden Jewels to make this work with Kinetic Blast. If you don't want to use these jewels, you can use Lightning Strike on the melee attack, but right now they're like 20 chaos each, and Kinetic Blast is my favorite skill. Sap of the Seasons gives us tons of penetration per mana burn, and we lower our mana using a reflected ring. I'm using this ring that's terrible, and it's a failure from somebody who's trying to mana stack, but I benefit from their cheap ring. And this lowers my mana enough. You want like around 400 to 600 mana, and if you can get there, then it'll help you sustain your mana burn. Note that you can't have total stacks of mana burn higher than your maximum unreserved mana, so you have to keep your mana total around 400 to 600. If it gets above 600, then your mana burn will get out of control, even with Laviangas. If it gets below 400, then you're not going to be able to have enough max stacks to really map comfortably. Now, if you start mapping and you press Sap of the Seasons, it's going to take an eternity to get enough stacks of mana burn. So you might have seen in that clip that I suddenly at the beginning of the map got a ton of stacks. What I did was I used the Battle Within, which inflicts mana burn on hit. Credit, by the way, to Exile Portals for this tech. And with Kinetic Blast, you hit so many times that it's really, really quick to stack. You can actually stack way too many. You can easily get like 500 stacks if you're not careful. Now, once you have a bunch of stacks, if you activate a second Tincture, that is Sap of the Seasons, while one's already active, you turn this first one off, and then the second one turns on, but it inherits the mana burn from the first Tincture, so you keep the mana burn going. So now that we have 100 to 200 stacks, we then use a max roll reduced mana burn rate, Sap of the Seasons, for 200 to 300 stacks worth of mapping time. Since if you start around 100, 150, and your maximum stack sustained is like 450, that can be 300. At about 1.2 seconds per stack, that's 4 minutes of mapping on the low end and 6 minutes on the high end, which is plenty of time. One important thing to note here is that there's a mastery here. The Tincture mastery for 1% increased charges gained per mana burn. Personally, I think this is way too unreliable if you needed to get your Flask Charges gain breakpoint, but it's a way of getting it done on a budget. So first, activate Laviangas, then you're going to activate your Battle Within Tincture. You're going to want to make sure that your Laviangas is always going. Now this is easy to do. You can just kind of spam it because we take this wheel here, Replenishing Remedies, which gives us tons of mana flasks per second. Since we're scaling charge generation, we have basically infinite charges. And then once you have that, you're going to attack, get a bunch of mana burn, and then swap over. And then all you have to do from then on is just keep pressing Laviangas every couple seconds. Just don't let it run out. And then you can just map freely, and you are a god. Until you see an enemy with a certain modifier that we'll be talking about later, but no spoilers yet. Okay, funny thing you can do is once you've swapped over to Sap of the Seasons, you can actually take this off, keep the Laviangas going, of course, and then you can put a flask in here, and it will actually start activating if you have, like activate on full. I don't know anyone would be crazy enough to do something so annoying on a regular basis, though. In order to get the build to work, you need to be able to fill your ward flask to full every time your ward breaks. Depending on how much reduced flash charges you get, how many regenerative runes nodes you get, and the specific mods on your iron flask, your specific breakpoint for how many increased flash charges gained will change. So remember that each of these nodes gives you 2 charges when your ward breaks, and a ward flask at base consumes 40 charges. That seems almost insurmountable at first, but there's a lot of things we can do. So first of all, you can get 4 of these nodes, right? I have 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one I anoint here. And then with a level 84, item level 84 flask, you can get the mod Rationed, which gives you up to 66% increased charge recovery. This is multiplicative, by the way. It might seem that the reduced charges mod is better, but this is not additive. This is multiplicative. So, and that is with your other increased charge recovery stuff from elsewhere. So let's calculate some breakpoints. So if you have 10% reduced flash charges used, which is super easy to get, it's right here on Careful Conservationist. And if you want, you can also get a 5% reduced flash charges used right here for up to 15. So with 10%, if you have 5 nodes, because you have like a really crazy Timeless Jewel, that gives you 10 gained on War Break, which means all you need with a rationed iron flask, excuse me, you need 117%. With 4, you need 172. With 3, 262. And with only 2 nodes, you need 443. I'm not even going to give you the number for 1 node. It's horrible. And if you have 15, then these are the numbers: 105 for 5, 157 for 4, 242 for the 3, and 413 for 2. Since the item level 84 ward flask is extremely expensive, you can calculate your own ward breakpoint by figuring out how many flasks, flask nodes, it's flask charges, how many flash charges you use. So for me, it's going to be 34 because I get the additional 5%. If it's just 10% and not 15% less, then it'll be 36. So I have 34, and you're going to then do charges gained on ward break So that's the sum total of all of those nodes. So if you have 4, this number is going to be 8. 3, this number is going to be 6. You multiply that by the charge recovery mod on the flasks. If this is nothing, then you don't multiply by anything. If this is 66, then do it. You can get, I think, a 50% mod on a much lower item level flask. So then, for me, I have 34 flask charges used per use. I have 4 of those nodes multiplied by my 66% increased charge recovery, and that equals to 2.56. Now, you already start with a base of 1, so, and you want to get slightly above this, so you're going to need, in my case, to get 157% increased to get from 1 to 257. So that's the breakpoint for 50% reduced flash charges used with 4 nodes, and that's how I get this number. There are a couple of sources of increased flash charges gained. So there's a bunch from clusters. These are going to be the main ones. There's Alchemist Genius, which is on the node Spiked Concoction on medium clusters. This one's conditional, sort of. All it needs is that you need to have a flask active, which will be always as soon as you get it running. But if you're relying on this to reach the breakpoint, then make sure you are always pressing Laviangas, especially before attacking or being hit at the beginning of a map. If you don't like this, just replace this with fasting. So fasting is also the other node, gives you 20%. And then you can get 10% with Brewed for Potency, which is also good because this one gives you recovery rate for the flasks, which help with our Laviangas and all that. For passives, you can get 20% from the small nodes on the Careful Conservationist wheel. These two. This one technically gives you 20%, but only if you've dealt a critical strike recently. I think that's way too conditional to even consider here. Let's see. You can get 25 from this wheel here, 10% here, and 15% here. This is also great for the Laviangas as well. And you can get 25% from the node Essence Extraction, which is all the way over here. And you probably want to just anoint this if you have space. Though if you might want to save your anointment for this to get like a far away regenerative runes node here. Okay. So how exactly do we get these timeless jewels? Well, what you can do is you can click this Find Timeless Jewel button here. Heroic Tragedy. Uthred is the one that has the keystone we need. You're going to choose the socket that you want it in. You can test a bunch. Filter nodes just says the nodes that I've currently selected on the passive tree are the ones that I want to check. So if you're going to want to check all the possibilities, then you're going to want to select all of them and then filter node. Otherwise, you can just not filter node. So if we don't filter node, you're going to search for the notable regenerative runes right here, which I already have one. And then you just search. And it'll show you a bunch of these. And you're just going to copy the trade URL and then paste it, and then it'll be the trade website where you can see that all of these things are somehow 150 divines or above. But hey, you might be able to snag one, especially if you find one like a weird place. Do note that it does transform all the nodes around it. So if you really want multi-shot, and you put your Timeless Jewel here, well, you're not going to have multi-shot anymore. You're going to have something else. Or Replenishing Remedies here, you're not going to have it if you put your Timeless Jewel here. It's going to be gone, though you will keep the small nodes. If you do replace Replenishing Remedies, then all you need to do is take the Flask Mastery for Mana Flask, gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. If you find that you're not getting enough charges on your Laviangas. I think that this is a great place to do it, though. And this is also a really good one. If you have some far nodes or nodes that are really annoying to get to, or even if you don't, a Impossible Escape, which is a jewel that lets you allocate passives within a specific keystone's radius, then this can be really nice. So I'm able to get 4 of these nodes here for some extra ward, some regenerative runes. I can also avoid this increased mana node, which I really don't want. This is also another really good place to do it. So you can get like a Supreme Ego, Impossible Escape, and then like grab a bunch of these. It's actually an excellent spot for it, even if you're not doing this ward business. Before I go on, I just want to say that you can get nodes here as well that give you charges on ward break. There's one for each charge. These can be really strong. This one in particular is very good for Immortal Call, since we have insanely high uptime on it. Makes it a little bit longer, lasts a little longer, and also gives it a buff. Also, if you're really tired of pressing Laviangas over and over again and you want it to last just a little bit longer, you can tattoo Flash Duration nodes onto your Dexterity nodes. It can make it a little bit more comfy. Alright, so this is super important. There is a rare modifier called Of Drought. And it is it is both a rare, as in it's not common, but it's a modifier on rare enemies. And when you hover over a rare, it'll say Siphons Flask Charges. And when you're inside the radius of that aura, you're gonna die. Because that monster has an aura that makes you lose flash charges, and crucially makes it so that you cannot gain flash charges, which disables your entire character. Magic Monster can't have this mod, so again, it's like only on rares. It's not the most common thing. It's also not the worst for this build, specifically because we're a ranged build and we can, like nuke things from 2 screens away, especially with our damage. But it does exist, and this will definitely get you killed on occasion. So if that's a big turnoff to you, along with all the other turnoffs of this build, like the cost or the mana flash stuff or the tincture stuff, then maybe turn back. There's also a Searing Exarch altar downside, by the way, that says enemies lose 6 flash charges every 3 seconds and cannot gain flash charges for 6 seconds after being hit. Just do not take that. And finally, I think there's a trap in the labyrinth that drains flash charges. I don't recall the last time I ever even noticed that, though I don't think I've done the labyrinth with this build. Okay, like I said before, our flat damage comes from ward right here. So we get a ton of cold damage. It doesn't work in Path of Building yet, so I put it in custom configs. It's different for the aspirational one since there's more ward there. So, but what about our other damage? So our percent increased damage, as well as our attack speed, comes from our large clusters. This is a spell cluster, and we're using Kinetic Blast, which gets double the benefit from increased spell damage. Each small node gives us 26% increased damage and 4% increased attack speed, which is excellent. It's also a great place to get attributes or resistances. The attack speed, by the way, can't normally roll on these, so don't try to roll attack speed on a cluster with the spell damage enchant. What you're going to do is you're going to use that new currency, the Refracting Fog from Mirage Deliriums. It's not too expensive right now, and you can just get a jewel like this and then Refracting Fog it until it gets the spell damage enchantment. Since all of these mods can roll on, I think, most attack jewels. Let's see. Crit chance is taken care of mostly from the tree, as well as supports from our many links. Make sure to get at least 1 chance to poison node. You can get this from here, or I think there's, there's one here. And you can also get 5% per tattooed int node if you want to do it that way. It's not up all the time, so it's a little bit POB warrior-y, but we hit so damn many times per second, like, it's pretty reliable, even with only a 15% chance to poison. We use that to enable Vile Toxins, which is one of our support gems. Gives us more damage per poison on an enemy. Yeah. Other than that, our cast on Warbreak summons a tornado, which we can hit with our projectile, which causes explosion. Since we have Pierce, it goes through and then also hits the enemy. So that's why we have these 2 setups here. So this is the projectile damage, and this is the explosion damage, which is 35% less, because Kinetic Blast says 35% less area damage. So it's not quite twice the damage, but it's a lot more damage. You do have to be kind of close to the enemy, though, to hit him once with the projectile and once with the explosion. We use returning projectiles. I have it as an imbue on the Kinetic Blast. So that's great. When it comes back, it'll do the same thing, but 70% less damage. It's the same as the usual Spellslinger setup, but requires no reservation. Though I will say, the cast on Wardbreak's behavior is a little bit weirder than Spellslinger. It'll auto-target, but it'll prefer to target the direction you're facing. But it's really not a big deal, since once you attack in a direction, you'll then face it, and any subsequent attacks will then hit the tornado. I use Ethereal Knives of the Massacre, just because it's got great coverage, and it'll trigger my Culling Strike, and also I'll have Power Charges up all the time, even though the crit chance of the spell itself is not amazing. Really, I mean, you can use any spell. Arc works really well. Any of its transfigured variants. Lightning Conduit of the Heavens is an interesting one, but I mean, really, you can just put whatever you want here. Just don't do something that is slow or like maybe won't hit enemies. Like I don't think the tornado would have great uptime on the power charge on crit. As far as imbuements go, the best imbue for Kinetic Blast is Returning Projectiles, but you can use Bone Shell or Hypothermia, either of these two. Those are pretty good. Vile Toxins also is fine. The best imbue for Shield Charge is going to be Momentum. And then you can get one on Precision for Arrogance. So you can get Arrogance imbued on Precision, which then allows you to save a link. So you can do Precision, Arrogance, and Clarity, which is a 3-link, because you, well, at least in my setup, I get an Abyssal Socket in my boots. So there's going to be a ton of warnings here about gems, but that's just because I'm taking advantage of imbued gems, and you can just do like a -1 on each equipment, and it'll work out well. Yeah. So oh, and finally on the Stone Golem, you can do either minion life or meat shield. I mean, it really doesn't matter here. You're summoning it so many damn times that it doesn't super matter. Blood Rage has nothing to do with the Stone Golem setup. I just wanted to fit in Blood Rage somewhere, and it works well on Cast on Water Break, just for a little bit of frenzy generation, as well as some attack speed. Yeah. As far as defenses, we need to mitigate damage over time as much as possible. The regeneration from the flasks along with the Olroth Bloodline mitigation is great, but you can go a little bit further than that. So you can get an immutable force with corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you. This does two things: the corrupted blood immunity, as well as taking care of stuns, which this build is super susceptible to because of our tiny life pool. This means then that we can take the Aracali Pantheon for 10% reduced damage taken from damage over time. You can get Poison Immune on boots as a corrupt essence modifier. And then you can also get Bleed Avoid. I mean, ideally, if you want the aspirational one, you get 50% chance to avoid bleeding on the Eldritch Implicit. And then you can get an Abyssal Socket as well. You can put the 50% chance to avoid Bleeding Jewel there. So you can get all that avoidance just from the boot slot, which is really nice. We use Period of Elements as our aura. Let's see, where is it? Attached to Eternal Blessing so that it doesn't reserve any mana. This is where we get our Elemental Ailment immunity. There's no real good auras for this build, besides maybe Skitterpots. We reserve life to use Precision and Clarity, which enables the... Clarity is just for the mana recovery mod on the Watcher's Eye, which is multiplicative with other mana recovery things. And I just want to note, do not reserve mana, because you'll have less maximum stacks of possible mana burn, and you really want as much as you can get, just for comfort's sake. If you want to be curse immune, you can get the you can replace this crit suffix on a Quicksilver with a curse immune suffix, and then you can use the Yugal Pantheon instead of the Aberrath one. The Yugal Pantheon also gives you reduced 50% reduced reflected damage, and then you can also get that another 50% for 100% immunity from Reflect on the body armor, but you lose the 10% increased mana recovery rate Eldritch Implicit mod. It's really up to you. Do you want more possible stacks of mana burn for like longer mapping experiences, or instead do you want to be able to do a greater variety of maps because you can do reflect mods, but you have to rush through your maps a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, to scale our ward, we get our flat ward from the belt Yinda's Stand, which gives us flat ward equal to a percentage of combined armor and evasion from our body armor. We also get a little bit of flat from our gloves, boots, and a tiny bit from the helmet. So this helmet is Faith Guard. It's a unique helmet. It converts increases to energy shield into ward, which allows us to scale our ward, because getting percent increased ward or generic defense is kind of difficult. Like, we can get a tiny bit from our golem, we get a tiny bit from the Runegraft of the fortress, but with this we can get a ton of percent from a Light of Meaning jewel here. We also get a ton of percent from all of the nodes that this Timeless Jewel modifies. So that's what I'm taking over here. Like, this is 12% ward, 8% maximum energy shield, so this is basically 20% ward. Same thing here, 20% ward, 12% ward, etc. 12% ward, 12% ward. So this is 20% ward. This actually is like a really good jewel if you can get one. 24.98. I sniped this one earlier. Only thing is you have to anoint this one node because it's so far away. You have to path like 8, 9 nodes or something. Like, what would it even be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, Jesus. So that anointment is perfect for that. Your intelligence nodes can be tattooed with increased energy shield, which will then get transferred or converted rather because of the Faith Guard helm. And yeah, that's how we get our ward scaling. Okay, in terms of other tech, this one's really interesting. Because Cast on Ward Break lowers cooldown substantially, it can lower the 9-second cooldown on Wall of Force down to, if I have my flasks up, down to under a second, which is absurd. You should absolutely not use this for mapping, but it can drastically increase your damage for bossing. I can't give you an exact multiplier since it depends on your total ward, number of projectiles, and attack speed, but you can think of it as giving you additional hits, roughly, because you'll miss some, equal to the amount on the gem per cooldown interval. And you probably don't want to use returning projectiles for this, though I am right now. A level 21 Wall of Force with a 1-second cooldown, for example, gives you 17 additional explosion hits per Wall of Force. If it's a 1-second cooldown, that'll be 17 additional hits per second. Though, remember, the explosion hits deal 35% less damage than projectile hits. I took out Ethereal Knives and Stone Golem just for visibility's sake, but, Laviangas, you'll see that my projectiles are hitting the wall. And, if I take the wall out, you'll see now they're going out away from me. Even though I'm still hitting the tornado's still there. And with the Wall of Force, you see how, a considerable amount of them are hitting the Wall of Force. So if you're right on top of a boss, this will, really, really, really raise your damage. Okay. I want to talk preemptively about mistakes that people might make. So this will be a section on, hey, something's going wrong with my build. Can you tell me what I'm doing wrong? Number 1, do not reserve your mana. It will reduce the maximum number of mana burn stacks you have. So don't reserve your mana. Okay. Second, let's say your life isn't recovering, but your mana is, and all your flasks are on, and you seem to be doing everything right. Well, make sure you have the Runegraft of Quaffing tattooed onto a mastery node, and make sure that it's also allocated, because it's on there, but you haven't allocated it. So make sure you allocate it so you have it. Okay, next one. Make sure that you've reached the breakpoint for your flasks. Go back to the section on breakpoints because your flask mods and your flask level do matter because the mods you can roll depend on the level. The breakpoint for your specific flask may be different than the ones I listed, especially if your mods are different. Okay, next one. If your tincture is shutting off while your flask is still on, that means that you're having too many mana burn stacks, or for some reason you don't have enough mana recovery and you're dropping the tinctures. So what this can mean is your mana might be too high, because then the mana burn, which is based on percentage of your mana, gets really high and the mana burn stacks become unsustainable. Or you're just getting too many stacks. Maybe you're getting 500 stacks because you're just attacking a bunch of things while you have Battle Within active. So if this is the case, try to swap to Sap of Seasons at a lower number of stacks if it's the stack issue. Or you could try to increase your mana recovery with one of the following methods. So first of all, you can get flasks applied to you have increased effect, which applies to mana flasks. So you can get that as an Eldritch Implicit on armor, or as a clarity mod on a Watcher's Eye. Though you do have to have clarity to activate this, like it has to be active. You could get a better Laviangas. I have a, I crafted this, I had to burn a ton of high quality Laviangas, and I got a 40 quality one. So this one recovers a ton more than like a base one with 20% quality. You can also get a higher roll on it. Regrettably, this is only a 42% roll. They roll from 30 to 50. A really big one is the increased recovery rate of flasks from herbalism on the passive tree. This means that the flask recovers the same total amount but in less time, which means that your flask lasts for less time, which sucks, but it massively increases the recovery per second. So this is pretty huge. Or maybe you don't have enough Brood for Potency nodes on your medium clusters, because these guys increase life and mana recovery from flasks. So yeah, if your mana is above 600, you should really try to lower it some more. Check to see if you're accidentally getting mana on any passes or gear, and try to remove it as much as possible. Some of it you're stuck with, like this mana roll on Katal's Geyser, but just try not to get too much. Next thing, if your tinctures aren't working and you're using a ranged tech and you're not like a lightning strike build or something, you need to get the Seasoned Hunter Forbidden Jewels. You also need to be a ranger if you have these, and for some reason you're some other ascendancy. If you're running out of charges on your Lavianga's flask, make sure that you grab the replenishing remedies wheel here for this node, the mana flask gain and the mana flask gain. If you're replacing this node with something else because your timeless jewel is here, just grab the flask mastery for life and mana flask gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. Okay, if you're getting one shot, then just try to get your ward a little higher. I found that once I hit around like 14 to 15,000 ward, it was pretty rare to get one shot, even just like face taking everything in juiced maps. Of course, like if you have crazy map months, then stuff happens in Path of Exile, but basically one shots, try to get a little bit higher ward. If you're confused why I have anointed Saboteur, well, it's not because this is secretly a trap or mine build. It's because when you have a node that's transformed by a timeless jewel, it changes. And what an anointment grants you is not the effect of the node, but it's giving you the actual node on your character's passive tree. So because this node itself is changed, you are granted this node, it allocates it, but you get regenerative runes instead. And if this were some other jewel, you would get some other node instead. So I'm not actually getting this modifier, I'm getting this one. If you're getting stun locked, because we have 1600 max life, then you can take the Brine King Pantheon, or you can grab an Immutable Force, which is that jewel that prevents stun, increased stun block recovery. Roll isn't super important. People say that there's a breakpoint at 961 and nothing below that matters, but I've done testing with like a 500 jewel, a 700 jewel, and a 900 jewel, and there is a big difference between each of them. Though the difference only matters if you're like getting absolutely swarmed and you're not doing anything. So not really a difference in like actual play. 500 is plenty. Okay, finally I want to talk about this build, directions, other things you could do with it. I think there's a version of this that you can do with Nimbus, and you would probably use greater multiple projectiles with it. I don't really think it's necessary or worth it, but somebody's going to think that's cool, so you can do that. It's also possible to do a version without the tincture or the mana flask stuff, which is almost entirely a different build. It's a lot more comfy. I did a rough path of building of it. I was only able to keep half the damage, and there's a lot of stuff you have to do to like maintain the mana cost. It's kind of a huge amount of investment to do that. But it is possible theoretically. I haven't like built it out or anything. And for all of you guys with 20 mirrors in your stash, if you're made of mirrors, there's an aspirational version in the path of building that you can check for like super endgame stuff. It can roll scale. It can really scale. The build can scale pretty damn high. I think that version gets like something like 30,000 ward and like 500 million damage per second, something absurd like that. So you can aim for that. As for what I'm gonna do, I don't know. I spent a ton of time in Path of Building, figuring this out and making everything work. I spent a ton of time in game doing testing, and I sort of went broke trying to craft all this stuff because I got insanely lucky trying to make this multi-link wand setup, and I kept failing. So I'm not really sure where this league is going for me. I don't know, again, I don't know how many people are going to see this. I can make a follow-up, or maybe I can make a crafting guide for the rare items if I get enough requests. The rares are pretty simple to make, aside from the multi-link wand. But I mean, I can like tell people to make this too. I mean, what I would really want is somebody to make like a, like a 30 quality perfect mirror item of this so I can mirror it. If I can get myself to make enough currency to, farm some mirrors. But thanks for watching, and again, tons of credit to Poop Butts and Exile Portals and all the other people who have been experimenting with Ward.